I would say Paul was very arrogant, entitled, always got his way. You could tell he was a rich kid.
He had a temper and he liked to control everybody, and if you didn't do what he wanted, he had friends.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we're going to look at 8 surprising new insights, this time from the HBO Docu-Series. Now, the tone of the docu-series from HBO is grittier and darker than the Netflix series. There's also a sense of the Hamptons community where the Murdaughs became kings. One gets a sense of how that the people there and the infrastructure there and the economy there is kind of deteriorating, and thus we have the sort of ebb and gyre of human fortunes. And that is depicted quite well in this HBO series. You kind of get a sense of the blue-collar folk sliding into insignificance. Meanwhile, you kind of have the meteor of the Murdaugh meteor blazing across the South Carolina sky. And so it's a 100-year blaze that all comes crashing down in a single year. It's quite a spectacular, kind of catastrophe. Now, many of the same characters we see in the Netflix series are back in the HBO series. Actually, the HBO series predates the Netflix series, but Paul's pal, Anthony Cook, we see him again, and he starts off seemingly in Paul's corner. He seems perhaps more in Paul's corner in this series than the Netflix series. Well, to begin with. Meanwhile, there's no love lost between Miley and Paul, as you heard at the beginning of the clip, and it's hard to fault Miley in her opinion of the youngest Murdaugh. Her description of Paul as bad-tempered, or at least temperamental, controlling and manipulative, I think speaks volumes of the culture running through the Murdaughs. In court, they pretend they're a family, just like everyone else.
One last thing, Mr. Murdaugh. Would you say that the Murdaugh name and legacy is something that's important to you and your brothers?
Yes, I think any family's name and legacy is important to them. Right. Do I think my family's name is more important than yours or any of y'all's? No, I don't.
Okay. But it's important to your brother as well, correct?
I think he would feel the exact same way as what I just said, that all families are important.
Okay.
He seems more than a little defensive on that question, doesn't he? Do the Murdaughs think they're more important than anyone else? No, we're just like everybody else. Well, did Paul think he was just like everybody else? Outside of court, they don't only have power, they're perfectly happy to wield it. And the boat incident shows what happens at the ass end of that legacy when they're allowed unfettered control of the wheel of everyone's fortunes. Now let's deal with some new depth and context from HBO. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. Number 1. So these are the 8 insights from the HBO docu-series. Number 1. Connor was driving the boat. The reality was that Paul and Morgan were having a serious argument on the boat in front of 2 other couples. Morgan was saying that she was actually done with him, so it was a serious argument. Paul was calling her a bitch and a W-H-O-R-E, and Paul was actually striking Morgan in front of his friends as well. So things were really getting out of hand. Anthony wanted to get off the boat and call an Uber, and Connor at times did take over the boat, the steering of the boat, especially when Paul abandoned the wheel completely. Now, Paul refusing to let Anthony get off the boat and go home on his own steam shows to what extent Paul wanted to control those around him, even in a silly scenario such as how to get home and who's coming along for the ride. Now, interestingly, Paul was shirtless, posturing and strutting, and in his underwear at the time of the incident. You sort of see him literally just in underwear and shoes when the police are on the scene. It actually took EMS 20 minutes to get Paul into the ambulance, and he had to be restrained in the ambulance as well. When you actually see him entering the hospital, he's actually got restraining straps over his chest and shoulders. And he also had to have his own ambulance because he was so intoxicated. So you get a better sense of just how out of control some of this activity was. Once at the hospital, drunk Paul, aka Timmy, was hitting on the nurses who were tending to him. As I say, you get a sense of just how extreme all of this behavior actually is. The bottom line, though, was who was driving the boat when it crashed? That's the bottom line. The answer is Paul. And crucially, Anthony says so a few times on camera.
Motherfucker right there away from me. The last time I grabbed my girlfriend and got down in the bottom of the boat, I begged and begged and begged and begged to let me drown. You fucking smiling like you're fucking funny. My fucking girlfriend goes. You think it's fucking funny? Hope is what fucking hell. You ain't gonna get no fucking. Oh, yes. Y'all know Alec Murdaugh? That's his son. Good luck.
What do you think that smile means? Well, it means Paul is in control, and Paul has to be in control. Except really when he's in trouble. Then he needs to be in control of the story. That someone else was in control. And so who was in control? It is supposed to be Connor. Same with Alex Murdaugh, isn't it? When things go south, then somebody else is in control, right? The whole incident with somebody supposedly shooting him in the road. Anyway, number 2, HBO actually shows body cam of Paul at the scene. Paul's lost his phone, so has Anthony, and so he tries to bum a phone off a cop. Now, not to put too fine a point on it, but Paul's too big a deal to let anyone else drive the boat. But when the shit hits the fan, he needs his grandpa to take the wheel of the investigation. We also see Anthony calling his mom 30 minutes into Mallory's disappearance. What is his mom going to do? Jump in the river and find her? The fact that Mallory gets lost in all of this and disappears, ultimately for a week, when there are 5 survivors that are right there, tells you something about just how drunk and distracted everyone on that boat actually was. Number 3, Paul was thinking 2 steps ahead. That's a quote from the HBO Docu-Series. So Paul wasn't thinking about Mallory. Paul was thinking about Paul and also about Connor. I think you kind of got to think about those words with regard to Alec Murdaugh. Was Murdaugh thinking about Paul? Was Murdaugh thinking about Maggie? Was he thinking 2 steps ahead as well? Was Alex Murdaugh thinking about Alex Murdaugh? Was he thinking about his money? Number 4, Murdaugh's murder and the Murdaugh Mafia. Now, having sketched the intrigue of the boat incident, and I have to say in some ways far more completely in terms of the body cam than Netflix, HBO's, some of that intrigue is really a lot more detailed, including showing Anthony saying on camera that Paul's going to get away with it at the scene because he's a Murdaugh, before screaming at him for smiling. And then HBO changes tack at that point. And they start talking about Buster Murdaugh, and that's the elder Buster Murdaugh, and how you don't want to bring out his Timmy side or get on his bad side. Number 5, Alex Murdaugh was a very dominating person. That's also a quote from the series. A colleague describes Alex Murdaugh as a bully. Martin Cook, Connor's father and Alex's former friend, described Murdaugh's personality as always wanting to be, needing to be, and having to be top dog in everything. Number 6, HBO provides CCTV footage of Randolph and Alex arriving at the hospital. This is quite incredible. It's really amazing to watch. Unlike Netflix that dramatized this aspect, it's incredible seeing Grandpa and Alex himself up and running at whatever time it was, 3 a.m, trying to get Paw off the hook. Number 7, Beverly Cook describes Maggie working the scene. Anthony's mother, Beverly, provides a disturbing anecdote about how, in the midst of Mallory's disappearance, while they sort of standing on the side of the river, Maggie actually approached her, Anthony's mother, and said cryptically, "What do you think will happen if Mallory is never found?" It's hard to say what exactly Maggie was angling at with this statement, but clearly it would have benefited Paul if she wasn't found, wouldn't it? And Beverly said she never spoke to Maggie again after that day. She was very offended by that particular statement. It suggests there wasn't only a single bad murder, right? Isn't there a suggestion that maybe there's more than one that one needs to look out for? And then the eighth and final insight. In court, police statements appear to show Connor may have been driving the boat after all. And so you have these transcripts. Someone asked Connor who was driving. I think that RO is the reporting officer. He answers, "I don't know." Now, despite the fact that the judge in the Mallory case said the charges were going to stand, Paul's lawyers were actually able to prevent him from being handcuffed or booked. Ultimately, he was photographed. His booking photo was taken in the hallway of the courthouse. I didn't know that. It's also interesting that Morgan Doughty and Connor Cook are both entirely absent, certainly from episode 1 of the HBO documentary, and all of these insights that I've provided come from just the first episode. It's quite interesting given that Morgan is the star witness for the Netflix series. Does she appear in episode 2? What do you think? So if you'd like me to dig into more insights in terms of episode 2 and 3 from the HBO docu-series, or if you'd like me to share, if you'd like to share some of your own, please let me know in the comments. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.